Well, we're glad that you're joining us for GLBC Connections. Today we're starting a new book, a new subject matter. We're going to go through the letter of James in the New Testament. The letter of James is a very interesting letter because it doesn't look like any of the other New Testament letters. It really, in many ways, is very unique and I think for that reason, very interesting. James doesn't seem to have any sort of guiding structure or overarching uniting thing, a theology that's putting it together. Rather, it's just a list of instructions. The question is, who are the instructions for? And here I think the answer is actually sort of helpful. James, very likely, was a brother of Jesus, and he was a pastor to Jewish Christians in the Jerusalem area. And it seems like he's writing to them. And what you need to know about them is they were under duress. They were persecuted. They weren't being killed, but they were losing their jobs. They were losing their social standing. And you have to understand, in Jerusalem in the first century, social standing mattered a lot. This was part of the Roman Empire. It's also part of what it meant to be Jewish. Your surrounding culture, who you were part of, defined you much more than who you were as an individual. Until the people that James writes to really were losing a lot by what they were going through, as they didn't have this social structure around them. Instead, they regroup and become their own group. They become their own church, their own gathering place. And as they bind together, they become more and more outcasts from the Roman culture and from, more specifically, the Jewish culture. So it's a hardship for them. This is the situation into which James writes, and he gives an immediate sense of help to the people. What they want to know is, what do we do? And James' letter really is all about that. How do you live when you're under duress? He starts right out with that theme, and this is what he says. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So James says, why are you going through this? Well, the why is a little harder question to answer, but at least James points to some purpose to it. That is, there's something they're gaining by going through it. James says, as you go through it, you gain perseverance. Well, I have to tell you, like many parents right now, my son is doing online schooling. He often does that from the kitchen table with his laptop speaker turned up full bore. So I've had the privilege of listening in as he learns calculus, something I haven't done for 30 years. It's kind of fun to listen to his teacher teach and for Jace to struggle through it. But I remember a few weeks ago as I was listening, and of course I just listen in the background. I'm usually doing other things. But his teacher said to the class, do you have any questions on the homework? And somebody said, what about such and such a problem? And he said, oh yeah, I didn't expect you to get that. I really didn't think you would get that. In fact, I gave it to you because I thought you wouldn't get it. And I wanted you to learn something from it. And then he proceeded to teach them a principle based on the problem that they couldn't get. Why did he do that? Well, causing them to struggle through it helped them develop a sense of perseverance and work and a thirst for the knowledge of how to go through it, that particular problem. I think that's helpful for how God deals with Christians, a little picture of it. We go through things, we don't always know the reason, and sometimes they're incredibly difficult. But trials, they do test us. And as we are tested and come through it, we develop perseverance. And from perseverance comes maturity, or as somebody else has said, a wholeness. That is the character quality that enables you and me to do what we are called to do. And so now we have something, I think, kind of fascinating. Trials have their purposes in our life. They have something that causes us gain. And for that reason, James says, you can consider those trials joy. Well, I admit I'm perplexed by that. When I go through hardship and trials, I admit I don't like it. I don't always see the big picture. I don't always see what God is doing in it. Sometimes I just get frustrated. I'm guessing you do too. Sometimes what we want is to be able to see the picture of what God is doing, and we just can't keep our eyes on it. We just struggle to really see where God is at work. Well, that leads James into the second point here in the opening chapter. And I want you to see this too, because even though it doesn't seem related right away, I think it's very related. In fact, there's two words that he uses back to back, I think, to symbolically show us that the two ideas are related. So here's the first big idea. We go through trials so that we gain perseverance, so that we will be mature and complete Christians of wholeness. But sometimes we don't understand it. So if we don't understand it, what do? Well, here in James 1, we pick it up in verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like the wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. What does James say? Well, I think he's really getting at when you go through trials and you don't understand and you can't see what God is doing, he says you should ask, and ask with faith. Why with faith? What's the faith in? I think the faith is in the idea that God is in fact doing something. He is developing our perseverance, our characters, making us whole. He is giving us that single-minded integrity to follow him wholeheartedly and trust him wholeheartedly. If we don't do that, we see the consequences in verse 8, and I think the idea is related, or really it's the antithesis of being whole. What does James say? If you doubt, you won't receive anything, and such a person is double-minded, or double-souled, literally is what it says, and unstable in all they do. So James says, if you want to be a mature Christian, if you want to have this wholeness, he says, ask the Lord when you go through trials. Ask him to show you what you're learning as you go through them, and have faith that God really is doing something. And if you don't have that, if you don't have that faith, you will not be the single-minded, whole Christian that you're intended to be. I think there's great encouragement here for us. I know many people that are watching this, you've gone through great hardship, great losses, there's grieving, relationship issues. I know those things, I understand it. But we trust that even in those things, even if they're evil in and of themselves, they are not the last word. That God still uses them at work in the life of the believer to give us the perseverance that we need to follow him wholeheartedly. So today, if you're tired, if you're frustrated with what you're going through, if you're having a difficult time, I'd encourage you just to stop right now and ask the Lord to show you why you're going through those things, what you can learn. Ask the Lord to give you some wisdom as you go through those things. I trust that's helpful, and I trust the Lord will reveal something to you if indeed you have faith that the Lord is at work in your life. And you know what? He is. I know he is. Thanks for joining us today. We'll spend 5 weeks in James and learn all kinds of things as we go through it.